The moment the homeless man stepped through the gates of the Harrison Museum of American History in Boston, I turned toward him. His torn green hoodie was stained with dirt, his boots were barely holding together, and a heavy black garbage bag rested on his shoulder as if it contained everything he owned. Security guards moved closer. Visitors whispered. Some laughed. Others covered their noses. Then, just as the guards reached for him, billionaire entrepreneur Jonathan Harrison suddenly froze. His eyes locked onto the glowing ruby pendant hanging from the stranger's neck. His face turned pale, his hands began to shake, and a cry escaped his lips that echoed across the marble courtyard. "That pendant is my son's." Silence swallowed the entire museum as the homeless man instinctively grabbed the necklace, unaware that the next few minutes would unravel a mystery that had haunted one of America's wealthiest families for over 20 years. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this every week. The homeless man was named Michael Carter, and life had never offered him the opportunities many people took for granted. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, he had grown up in foster care after losing both parents in a tragic highway accident. Every foster home seemed colder than the last, and by the age of 18, he was completely alone. He worked construction, washed dishes, loaded trucks, and slept wherever he could afford. Then another accident shattered his back and cost him his job. Medical bills piled up. Friends disappeared. Within a year, he was living on the streets, surviving by collecting recyclable materials and helping churches clean their parking lots for free meals. Yet despite everything, Michael remained gentle. He shared blankets with veterans sleeping under bridges and often gave away half his food to children whose parents struggled even more than he did. Around his neck hung a magnificent ruby pendant surrounded by delicate gold craftsmanship unlike anything a homeless man could possibly own. Every person who noticed it assumed it had been stolen. But Michael never sold it because it carried the memory of the only person who had ever treated him like family. Nearly 24 years earlier, Michael had been a frightened teenager wandering through a public park in Denver after running away from another abusive foster home. There he found a little boy crying beside a frozen pond. The child had become separated from his parents during a winter charity festival. Before Michael could comfort him, the ice beneath the little boy cracked. Without thinking twice, Michael jumped into the freezing water and pulled him to safety. During the chaos that followed, ambulances arrived, police officers secured the area, and the exhausted teenager quietly disappeared before anyone learned his name. As he walked away soaked and shivering, he noticed something glittering in the snow. It was the ruby pendant, broken from the child's neck during the rescue. He searched for the family for hours, but never found them. Believing it was impossible to locate its owners, he kept it only as a reminder that, for one brief moment, he had actually mattered to someone. Jonathan Harrison had spent those same 24 years believing the pendant had vanished forever. His son, Nathan Harrison, had survived the accident but suffered severe hypothermia. During the confusion, the priceless family heirloom disappeared. Insurance companies investigated. Detectives searched pawn shops across several states. The Harrison family quietly accepted that it had been stolen by opportunists taking advantage of a frightened child. Now, standing only a few feet away from Michael, Jonathan couldn't understand how the pendant had appeared around the neck of a homeless stranger. Museum staff demanded security detain Michael immediately. Wealthy guests assumed the man must be a thief. Social media influencers began recording videos, expecting another dramatic arrest to post online. Even Jonathan's elderly mother, Margaret Harrison, insisted the police should be called immediately. Michael stood trembling, too exhausted to defend himself. Years of being judged by appearances had taught him that no one believed a homeless man. Instead of ordering an arrest, Jonathan surprised everyone. He quietly asked the guards to step back. Looking directly into Michael's tired eyes, he asked where he had gotten the pendant. Michael slowly removed the necklace from around his neck. His hands shook, not from fear of losing it, but because it represented the only beautiful memory in his difficult life. He carefully explained how he had found it after rescuing a little boy from icy water decades earlier. Every word sounded unbelievable. Guests rolled their eyes. Museum employees exchanged skeptical looks. But something about Michael's voice carried no bitterness, no desperation, only quiet honesty. Jonathan listened without interrupting. Then something extraordinary happened. Nathan Harrison, now a successful physician who had been attending a museum charity gala inside the building, overheard the conversation and walked outside. As Michael described the frozen pond, the bright red winter scarf, and the tiny toy airplane the little boy had refused to let go of, Nathan's expression changed completely. Those were details never released publicly. Nathan slowly rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a faded scar stretching across his wrist. Michael immediately recognized it. He remembered wrapping his own torn jacket around the bleeding arm before emergency workers arrived. Suddenly, the impossible became undeniable. The homeless man standing before America's elite wasn't a thief. He was the forgotten teenager who had saved the billionaire's son. An overwhelming silence settled across the courtyard. The same people who had mocked Michael only minutes earlier now stared at the ground in embarrassment. Margaret Harrison began crying quietly. Jonathan stepped forward and embraced Michael with tears streaming down his face. The billionaire had spent decades believing an anonymous hero had vanished forever. He had no idea that hero had spent most of his adult life sleeping under bridges while carrying the very pendant everyone assumed had been stolen. News cameras captured the emotional reunion, but none of them could capture what Michael felt inside. For the first time in decades, someone looked at him with gratitude instead of suspicion. Jonathan insisted Michael accompany the family inside the museum rather than being escorted away. The elegant banquet hall fell completely silent as one of America's richest men introduced the homeless guest as the man who had once risked everything to save his only child. The applause began slowly. Then every person in the room stood. Some wiped away tears. Others couldn't stop clapping. Michael had never experienced a standing ovation before. During dinner, Jonathan quietly learned the heartbreaking truth about Michael's life. Every setback, every night on cold sidewalks, every opportunity lost because people judged his appearance before hearing his story. Nathan listened with guilt, realizing his family had spent millions collecting rare artifacts while never finding the young man who had saved his own life. The Harrison family made Michael an offer that stunned everyone. Not money, not charity, a future. Jonathan invited Michael to become the museum's community outreach director, helping create educational programs for homeless veterans, struggling families, and foster children. Jonathan believed no one understood hope better than a man who had survived without losing his compassion. Michael hesitated. Years of disappointment had taught him that promises often disappeared. But Jonathan kept every word. Michael received medical care for injuries ignored for years. He was given a modest apartment instead of a mansion because Jonathan wanted him to rebuild life with dignity, not dependence. Counselors helped him recover emotionally. Museum historians even displayed a small exhibit honoring ordinary Americans whose anonymous acts of courage changed lives forever. At its center rested a photograph of a younger Michael alongside the restored ruby pendant, now displayed with his permission as a symbol that true heroism often goes unnoticed. Months passed. Schoolchildren visited the museum not only to study history, but also to hear Michael speak about resilience, forgiveness, and choosing kindness despite unimaginable hardship. Many students admitted they had once laughed at homeless people. After hearing Michael's story, they never looked at another struggling stranger the same way again. The greatest surprise came one Christmas morning. Nathan introduced Michael to his young daughter, Grace. The little girl hugged him tightly and handed him a handmade ornament shaped like a ruby pendant. She whispered that her father said heroes sometimes wear torn clothes instead of capes. Michael broke down in tears, not because of the ornament, but because someone finally saw him for who he truly was. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, share it with someone you care about, and let us know in the comments whether you believe one act of kindness can change an entire lifetime. Your support helps these inspiring stories reach more people around the world. Special request: before this story ends, please comment with the words, "Kindness always comes back." We'd love to know how many people still believe compassion can change lives. Years later, visitors entering the Harrison Museum often paused before a bronze plaque near the entrance. It didn't celebrate a billionaire, a famous politician, or a historic inventor. Instead, it honored an ordinary man named Michael Carter, whose greatest wealth had never been money but the courage to save a frightened child without expecting anything in return. Thousands of people read those words every week, and many left inspired to treat strangers with more empathy than they had the day before. Jonathan Harrison often said the museum's most valuable treasure was never the priceless paintings or ancient artifacts locked behind glass. It was the lesson one forgotten homeless man had taught an entire nation, that appearances can deceive, gratitude should never expire, and the smallest act of selfless love can echo across generations. And every time sunlight reflected through the restored ruby pendant, it reminded everyone who saw it that the brightest treasures are not worn around our necks, but carried quietly inside our hearts.